I spent the week basically lying in a cold, dark room contemplating how much of an error I made on the podcast last week by saying that Warren Gatland will definitely be the Wales coach on the summer tour.
There's been a sort of composure to the way Finn Russell has picked apart England and a real intelligence to it.
We are told this is a golden generation of Scottish players. They need to start winning and proving it.
And then the heavens opened and we played much better in the second half.
This Saturday, England will not be as bad as they were last year. It's almost impossible, in all honesty, in this fixture.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby podcast. Every rugby player knows they need the support of their team to get the best results. And it's the same with insurance. When you are looking for great deals on your insurance, you can find the perfect support in Go.compare, helping compare the right deals for you. Feel the deal with Go.compare.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the latest episode of the Telegraph Rugby podcast. Hope you all had an excellent fallow week and that you're rested, recovered for a busy week ahead with the Calcutta Cup game at Twickenham. I'm Ben Coles. I've got Charlie Morgan here. Hi Charlie.
Colesy.
I've got Charles Richardson here. Hello, Charles.
Hello, hello, hello.
How were your fallow weeks? Charlie, let's start with you. What did you do? How did you get away from rugby on your fallow week?
Oh, spoiler. The centrepiece of my weekend off was a busman's holiday to the Stoop. Took my wife and I took our 4-year-old for his about third game, I think, and our 20-ish month old for his first game. With mixed results. I think eventually, on balance, they enjoyed it. Certainly,
define on balance.
Didn't have a great first half. Started with the fireworks were a bit too loud. It was our
That was going to be about the players for a second.
In the style of a player rating, but we came through strong at the end and enjoyed it by the end. I would say.
Good. I'm glad. I'm relieved. And in terms of the actual game itself, what stood out? How much did you actually watch?
Well, not very much. Not too much. But yeah. Saracens picked about a third team plus Alex Good, and Harlequins picked mostly front liners, and Saracens won 30-29. Alex Donbrant was really good for Harlequins, but it was quite a strange game. Some bits of high quality, but Saracens stuck in and got a win that would have been really, really satisfying for them in the context of of their season, I guess. And that's the kind of win that can get you momentum despite not having their front liners on. It's quite a funny sort of moment at the end. As the second half had been quite quiet, which Heath enjoyed, but because Saracens were sort of clawing back in, and as the away team, that wasn't getting much love from the crowd. But then at the end, Harlequins had to announce that Harlequins had gone through and Saracens haven't, which was probably one of the loudest cheers in the whole sort of game, which was quite funny.
And who have they gone through with?
Well, the quarterfinal
what a segue
lineup
wow
is as follows. I haven't got it up. So we're going to have to
go.
I've
done a drum roll and everything.
It's Newcastle v Gloucester, it's Exeter v Sale, it's Northampton v Ealing, and it's Bath v Harlequins.
Well done. That was delivered so quickly. I don't know if I fully processed who's in it, but thank you for delivering that. I wanted to know who jumped higher, Heath at the start with the pyrotechnics, or you in Dublin when the gun goes off before the game. Who achieves more height?
I would say Heath by a whisker, only because it was the second time that I've been obviously caught out now by the Aviva Stadium cannon.
Yes, of course. Charles, what did you do this weekend?
I went to London Welsh, another busman's on Saturday. I went to London Welsh to watch London Welsh against Jersey in the 5th tier of English rugby. There must have been I was staggered. I mean, naively perhaps, but must have been about 2,000 people there. It was absolutely unbelievable. And a great day, great game. Jersey just nicked it at the end. Guy Thompson, former Leicester and Wasps flanker, playing at 12 for Jersey.
This is the amateur arm of the club that went bust a couple of years ago.
This is the amateur arm of the club that went bust a few years ago, exactly. And they nicked it at the end. Although London Welsh should still win the league, but they were the top two and they're easily the top two now. Other than that, I spent the week basically lying in a cold, dark room contemplating how much of an error I made on the podcast last week by saying that Warren Gatland will definitely be the Wales coach on the summer tour. And then you're being sacked in the morning, and he was.
So I wasn't going to bring up our predictions for Gatland and how it got. I can't remember what you said. Did you say?
I think he shouldn't be.
I think I said he was going.
I think in our defence, we were not necessarily aware of Warren turning down the payout. I think we all said they can't afford to sack him, basically, which I think is still semi-true.
Hey, I mean, whatever makes you feel
because
better,
obviously, as we reported last week, he turned down a payout, which is pretty admirable of him, in fairness.
Yeah, that is, to be fair. I did not go to any Busmans, but I did try and watch a lot of Super Rugby. I fell off my Super Rugby watching last year, and as we sort of said, with Australia coming up and the Lions, might be good to actually know a bit of the kind of depth in Australia, and there were some great moments.
Speaking of that, in another sort of childcare related rugby crossover, I was woken up silly early on, I think it was a Saturday morning, by one of the little ones, and managed to sort of turn on my phone and see how the Brumbies were getting on in Fiji against the Drua. And I saw Luke Reimer, who'd been the Australia A open side in the game in November. So he was the opposite man of Henry Pollock, and he turned around a game. I've rarely seen somebody do that single-handedly. 3 jackal turnovers and 2 tries, all in the last sort of 12 minutes of the game to win it for the Brumbies, which was remarkable. He just stinks of a guy who's going to be a thorn in the Lions' side in one of those midweek games and maybe get a test call-up. That's what it felt. That's what it felt like to me. But yeah, absolutely, as you say, Colsey, cool to kind of get aligned with what's going on in Australian rugby before a big summer.
Hopefully we'll be as entertained on Saturday. Calcutta Cup. It's a big week. We had a chat with Duncan Hodge this week about the 25th anniversary of Scotland's Calcutta Cup win in surely one of the filthiest games weather-wise in terms of Calcutta Cup matches at Twickenham, where it just looked like his try in his 19
water.
Points. He's just kind of sliding through a massive splash zone. Yeah, it was absolutely outrageous. So we'll hear from him a bit later. And an England player labelled that their worst moment in an England shirt that game. Can anybody think who that might have been?
I said Dawson. Well, it was not him.
I think...
Was it not him?
It is either Dawson or Healy, I think. It might have also have been Jono saying it was the lowest he'd felt in an England capacity because he didn't play. He was injured.
He wasn't there, was he?
He was injured. But one of them definitely said it 100%.
I wonder if it was Healy, because Healy drops it at the end and then just punts it away in frustration. So I wonder if it might have been him, but we will give you the answer towards the end of the podcast.
Because England were going for the Grand Slam and Scotland hadn't won a match. They'd lost to Italy on the Italians' debut.
They had,
and they got completely stung by a Townsendless Scotland.
Well, listen, you'll hear Duncan's take on that memorable day and also what he thinks about Scotland going into this week. But we didn't chat too much about Scotland against England last week. So now we can get into a big meaty preview section of it. Okay, Scotland are going for 5 wins in a row against England. And I think we said last week that probability suggests that for that reason alone, we're not sure that they can do it. Charles, what are we also worried about with Scotland? Is it just the Ireland performance, or is it the injuries as well? Like, what kind of makes you think this might not be Scotland's day?
It's a weird one because I don't want to say we say this every year, but I think there is also this attitude every year of, England will beat Scotland, surely. As, Scotland usually come in as underdogs, and yet they've won 5 in a row. I don't think the Ireland match makes any difference, really. I don't think Scotland, the chances of Scotland ever winning that game were pretty slim. And what happened in terms of their injuries that you mentioned with Finn Russell and Darcy Graham both going off early on was hugely disruptive. Finn Russell will be back, or at least that is the way the wind is blowing. He will be back for the Calcutta Cup, and it's likely to be a very different Scotland team. With him in, will they go with Tom Jordan at 12? Probably, you would assume so, given that's how they lined up against Ireland, and they'll keep it like that without Sione Tuipulotu. And I'm not sure who'll come in for Darcy Graham. Maybe Rowe or Stain.
Could be Rowe. Rowe was on the bench against Italy, I think, when I watched them. It wouldn't shock me if it was him. He's such a good player. He's just such a terrible, terrible run with injuries. He had that horror injury where he was basically out for a season.
But I mean, obviously, they play very quickly. Hugh Jones is in great form. Doohan is obviously very dangerous and has been a thorn in England's side now for the past 2 Calcutta Cups. And England should win at home, especially on the back of that French victory. They have the momentum, which we know in the Six Nations makes a lot of difference. But it's not a foregone conclusion by any means. And I think the bookies making England 9-point favourites is alarming, I would say. Very generous.
Yeah, but we talked about that last night, Charlie, didn't we? Because I pointed out that Scotland were 3-1 with some bookmakers to win at Twickenham, which I just think is... I know Scotland have got injuries and they have lost a lot with Tuipulotu, I think, in terms of purely as a distraction to kind of take attention off Finn Smith, but 3-1 feels quite punchy.
Yeah, Scott Cummings his absence has hurt them as well. But what just has hit home to me over the 4 games that they've beaten England in succession is how they've been dominant. And I know they've come back they've been close. Some of those have been very close games, and some of them have required Scotland to kind of come back from kind of pretty considerable. They've been behind quite considerably. But they've been so sharp. They've been better with their ball movement. They've been better at the breakdown. They've been cleverer when it comes to kicking strategy and stuff like that. And it's going to take England to sort of get over another psychological hurdle in this, as they did in the France game by snapping that streak of 7 consecutive losses to Six Nations and Rugby Championship teams. So there's going to be a bit of a weight on England. And again, it's the easiest thing to say in the world, but if they start poorly, England, and allow... Finn Russell has just been phenomenal against them. And I mean that...
It's their final, isn't it? Always.
Yeah, it will be more so, I think, this championship is fair, for now that that Ireland game is out of the way for Scotland. But there's been a sort of composure to the way Finn Russell has picked apart England, and a real intelligence to it, and I mean that with his kicking game mainly. And he's been really measured in these games. It's not been a case of him, although there are there's that famous pass from 2018, isn't there, that carved England, beautiful pass that went over Jonathan Joseph. But he's just systematically picked apart England, and that is gonna be a big kind of subplot of this weekend. But it's so important for England to get back.
I think the performance last year at Murrayfield was probably almost the nadir for England under Steve Borthwick.
I was just wondering if it was Scotland. I was thinking, is it Scotland's best performance out of the 4 wins? And I'd say probably, yeah, because they were up 30-14, I think, or something, or 30-16.
Yeah, but just England was so bad in that game last year. You know, well, actually, they started really well with that George Fairbank try.
Well, yeah,
the strike move, and it sort of thought, and everyone sort of thought, "Hello, here we go."
Yeah.
And then it all completely unravelled. The year before, Scotland were very good at Twickenham.
Yeah, they were
when they won that close game.
It just feels like we're a long way from that 2021 win, aren't they? Where it was,
yes,
and the emotion of that.
Yeah, I mean, England will not be as bad as they were last year. I think it's almost impossible, in all honesty, in this fixture. And they're at home on the back of a French win. I can see England maybe not winning by 9 points, but I can see England winning fairly comfortably.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fairly hefty prediction. We'll know. Well, is it? Maybe now I'm doubting myself. Maybe 9 points is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think...
I'm torn about this one.
I'm not sure. I think against France, we sort of said... Well, I certainly said, and I think we sort of agreed that we thought it might be in the balance until sort of 60 minutes. And then I thought that France would pull away. I can see England starting really well. I can see them, after that performance last year, wanting to exercise a few demons and starting pretty well and always keeping Scotland at arm's length.
We're not expecting anything massive selection-wise from England, are we? Well, not in terms of the backline, but
I think backline will be probably unchanged.
With the forwards, I think we debated this about the line-out a couple of weeks ago, last week. Do you bring in Ollie Chesham, a blindside flanker, to shore that up, or do you bring Chesham in and swap out George Martin? Do you make a change at hooker? I feel like I'm asking you 4 questions here, Charlie, 3 questions. But I mean, where are you leaning in terms of what they should do with the selection? Can
I just go back to the backline a second?
I
wonder whether Scotland are going to be more intuitive with their kicking game than France were, if only because they would have looked at how blinkered France were with keeping faith with that long and on strategy. And they will definitely give, if Marcus Smith is at 15, they will definitely give their chasers contestable high balls against him, which France didn't do at all. They gave Marcus Smith 1 high ball to catch, and that was in the 74th minute, and he could catch that under no aerial pressure. So that might be a concern. I wonder how Tom Roebuck hasn't been in the mix seemingly to be involved, but he's still in the training squad and they like him. He's a good player and he's exceptional in the air. So that's one interesting wrinkle.
Steward wing.
Steward is there that they can look at.
They've teased that.
Yeah, they have teased that. But yeah, you're right. I'd say the pinch point in the pack is I think they will look at Jamie. I think they will look at Jamie George and just kind of appreciate how much he brought off the bench and how sort of splitting up that experience really helped England finish strongly, because they really did finish strongly. I know they got over the line, so there'll be some hindsight bias in that, but if you watch that game back, they really did take control of that sort of last quarter.
He has to stay in the 16 shirt for me.
I would say so. What just kind of what sticks in my mind is that England's line-out vastly improved with Ollie Chesham on, but he wasn't on at 6. They finished with the back row that had started against Ireland in Dublin, the two Currys and Earl, and I think they will want that mobility. Whether that's, I don't think that will be with the starting back row from Dublin, but I think it will be with Willis, Curry, and Earl. I think it would be almost a bigger call to break that up than it would be to sort of take away what Martin gives you in the scrum and the heft around in the tight exchanges, given that they're playing against Scotland rather than France, and they'll think they'll be able to back themselves with Chesham at lock to stand firm in the scrum and in the tight exchanges around the ruck. So that's I think what I'd do is bring in Chesham, because it's so important that they shore up that line out in the first 50 minutes, because it's been really poor.
Yeah, especially against France, it just felt slightly wasteful, and they need that kind of set piece to deliver off, don't they?
It did. I wonder whether France didn't compete as well against Chesham. They changed their locks as well, and I wonder if that had something to do with it. I wonder if with Oredu and Guillard on, because there's no. Okay, Chesham is a more athletic line-out jumper, more dynamic line-out jumper than George Martin, but they still only really had 2 out-and-out jumpers on the field. There's no sort of actual reason why the line-out should have functioned so significantly better just by the presence of a slightly better jumper.
Well, Jamie George there as well.
With Jamie George there as well. Yeah. But, so yeah, I mean, if you're saying Jamie George has got the 16 shirt, I think I made this point last week. I think I might even be tempted to start Theo Dan at 2, just because if Luke Cowan-Dickey is there for his arrows and they don't go well, then you might as well cut your losses and have Theo Dannin, who's a cannonball in the loose, and risk the line out, and then maybe pick 3 jumpers and then have Chesham at 6.
Is the beauty of Cowan-Dickey what he gives you, clearing out rucks and around the park and defensive
jackal threat,
and jackal threat? I guess, is that the balance?
We're not seeing much of a jackal. Has he won 1 jackal turnover in the 2 games?
Yeah, against that one against Ireland.
Oh yeah, there was one against Ireland. On the line,
he knocked one on, didn't he? When France sort of made a half break early in the second half, he's knocked one on while being there.
What do you think about Theo Dan? Sorry, Charlie, just while we were on this Hooker debate, because he hasn't really had any. I was going to say any big starts. He's had starts against like Chile and then the bronze final.
Yeah.
Are you getting to a point where it's like I could do with seeing him have a start just to gauge how it works?
He's a really interesting case. I think he's up to, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think he's up to up to 15, between 15 and 20 caps now.
Certainly in that ballpark.
He's got an enhanced EPS contract. They love what he can do in the loose, and he was maybe trying a bit hard to make things happen in that cameo against Ireland, wasn't he? And sort of running down blind alleys a little bit, but he's so dynamic. His acceleration is pretty remarkable. What we kind of hear that offsets that is, well, we can see the throwing he's not Jamie George in the throwing department, but very few people are. The worry, I think, is scrummaging. And again, there are sort of compromises everywhere, right? But I think what sort of will count in his favour is how he and Jamie George have dovetailed in a Saracens 23 in a squad of 23 over the season. That seems to be going really nicely for them, playing 50 and 30 and splitting it that way. But no, you're right. They're so fond of him that you think a big start is around the corner for him, because he's holding off really impressive Premiership performers like Curtis Langdon, like Gabriel O'Gray at Bristol. So yeah, it would be a big call, but it would enhance England in some ways, and it would be a compromise for England in other ways.
17 caps for the record is how many he's on. So they are ticking up slowly but surely.
And I know you mentioned the compromise there of the scrum, but I think that's maybe not. I know they've only played 2 matches, so we don't want to sort of go over the top with it and be a bit sort of melodramatic. But England's scrum has been excellent in the 2 games. Gen's got penalised a couple of times against Beelum, against Ireland. I think unfortunately and unluckily on a couple of occasions. But then against France, he was dominant against Sweeney Atonio, against that Atonio Meafu behemoth on that French right hand side of the scrum.
Just to finish this preview section, a quick teasing question for you both. Who going into this is under more pressure to win? Is it England to back up the France game because we saw them have a big win against Ireland last year and then they didn't back it up? Or is it Scotland because they've come off a game against Ireland where they were well beaten, but this is still a very talented generation who people are just starting to say, should we be expecting a bit more out of? Who would you think?
I think both are under pressure. Well, it's a Six Nations match. Of course, there's a pressure to win. I think Scotland will be under more pressure to win because they're coming in off the back of a loss. And if they lose at Twickenham, then they're staring down the barrel of 2 victories, probably at best, against Italy and against Wales, you would assume. But we don't know what Wales under Matt Shearer are going to look like. They might be reformed, rejuvenated, who knows. But I think England will absolutely not want to lose because they've lost 5 in a row against Scotland. And they've lost 4 in a row. This would be 5 in a row. And they want to back up that French victory. And they still, they are in the frame of actually winning the whole thing. But I think Scotland have to win. I think there will be question marks. This is a golden generation we are told this is a golden generation of Scottish players. They need to start winning and proving it.
I think England. I think England just because they're at home. I think if you try and sort of think about what the feeling would be towards an England loss, I think it would be just really quite damaging because we've already sort of been here before last season with them having beaten Ireland and everybody thinking, right, okay, that's the sort of launch pad for more consistency and more effectiveness and accuracy in how they're playing. I think to go from edging France to another kind of underwhelming loss would be pretty tricky.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think there's actually an enormous amount of pressure on England to prove that wasn't a slightly. And I say
flash in the pan.
I say it only because France bombed so many chances that it wasn't a bit of a. I don't know England grafted to stay in it, but to prove it wasn't a bit of a fluky win, I think they have to start consistently delivering wins.
I completely agree with that, and I wouldn't argue with that at all. I just think if England lose on Saturday, yes, there'll be question marks, but they will then probably go on and beat Italy and Wales and end with 3 wins, which isn't enough and isn't acceptable, but they will have it. I think if Scotland lose, then it could be genuine calls for Townsend's head time.
Yeah. Hey, don't rule out Wales against England in Cardiff on the final last day. Let's hear a bit more about Scotland now from Duncan Hodge, the Calcutta Cup hero from 2000. I spoke to him a few days ago.
Delighted to have Duncan Hodge on the Telegraph Rugby podcast this week. Duncan, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Very good.
It's a busy week, the Calcutta Cup week, and we thought who better to chat to than somebody who played a pivotal role in a Calcutta Cup game back in 2000. So what are your memories of that day? How often does it sort of come up in conversation with people?
Yeah, no, it comes up a lot, and especially this week. But yeah, I mean, that was one of those sort of bizarre games. I don't know it was the first ever Sunday game, first ever Sunday Six Nations game. We were definitely not expected to win. England had been trouncing everyone by, I don't know, average of 25, 30 points. I don't know what the spread was on the game of the bookies, but we hadn't won. We lost in Rome first game up, Italy's first game, and then with a few injuries. But we played okay the week before against Wales. And England should have been out of sight in the first half, if we're being honest. But we managed, I think, to get to halftime about 9-6, and then the heavens opened, and we played much better in the second half.
Give me an idea of the chat kind of internally that week in terms of, yes, you hadn't won a game, but you had the potential to obviously spoil England's day by denying their Grand Slam. What was that kind of talk like inside
Yeah,
your camp?
I mean, there was a fair bit of that. Plus, obviously, Martin Johnson didn't play. There was a few people we know well, Matt Dawson, Austin Healy, Delalio, and these guys, they certainly on the pitch in that first half were fairly vocal as well. So look, it was if we hadn't won that game, we were wooden spoon, and that was probably the main thing. I know it ties in with that we played England, so the two sort of combined there. But the main thing was we hadn't done ourselves justice, and if we hadn't won, we were a wooden spoon that year. So. Yeah, so the two sort of stars sort of aligned, as it were.
When you say fairly vocal, were you getting chirps like between at scrums and passages of play? What are we talking about?
Austin and Matt are always fairly like that. And I think when Delalio scored, I can't remember what he said, but he cruised in pretty much untouched under the post. And I'm sure he said, there was a bit of chat then. And I think we turned them over on our line about 2-3 minutes before half time. And we managed, and I think at the time at that score, it must have been 9-6 or 9-3. It should have been 14-15-3. Instead, we got to halfway, kicked a penalty, win in 9-6. And that gave us real belief. And we always had known all week that there was weather coming in as well. So that was always kind of forecast. So that, look, it probably played into our hands. It always does with a home crowd, doesn't it? You tend to get a few decisions and what have you.
In terms of that weather, I've seen footage of it, obviously. Where does that kind of rank in terms of wettest, kind of filthiest games that you've played in?
I mean, I think certainly of all my internationals, I think probably the filthiest day. I mean, it was cold. I mean, I think the game was it 2nd of April, or I think the game was quite late on. It shouldn't have been that. Yeah, I think it was really, really cold, especially for that time of year. But it was freezing cold, and obviously Andy Nicol, I think there's various pictures of him and footage of him lifting the cup with a big cut in his chin and pretty much shivering cold.
Give me an idea of what it was like. Well, firstly, scoring your try, I should ask you about, because it's obviously an actual splash dive for your try, given you took a heap of water with you. I mean, that must have been a great moment.
I mean, it was one of those freaky things for a couple. I mean, everyone now ridicules me for my 50-meter try, which was actually 12 inches. But I mean, I had no right to. I mean, I think Jim Telfer said something after the game as well. I mean, I had no right to be anywhere near that. It was a sort of pick and go little sequence, and not in these days that wasn't planned. That was just we were close to the line, whatever. I think Gordon McElwam, the prop, went, and the ball sort of almost, and I think I saw he was short of support. So then I go, and all of a sudden the ball scooped out. So I just grabbed it and kind of dived over the line. And I can remember looking at the referee because when I landed on it, the ball then slipped out. So I'm thinking, he might not give this. But it was a definite try. And I've got a great picture. We're all looking up at the kind of referee to see if he's actually going to give it. But I mean, it was a definite try. But
yeah.
I mean, that was with, 7-8 minutes to go or something. And then I sort of behaved like a loon for 10 seconds, which is not my normal at all. So I get Mickey taken at me for that as well.
He had a busy day, the referee, Clayton Thomas. I watched watching highlights of it. There was a tackle, I think, by who was it for Scotland? James McLaren, was it, on Mike Tyndall? Which I'd love to know the outcome today and how quickly that would be sorted out. Give me an idea of what it was like afterwards. I mean, obviously England didn't know that that was the first kind of run of missed Grand Slam opportunities that they were going to have. What was it like afterwards, kind of with those players?
Well, I remember there was a bit of a stushy afterwards about, was it something to do with them not watching us receive the cup or something, which none of us were aware of at the time, and from my memory was totally misplaced. I think England copped a bit of stick for that, but it was a kind of weird one because it was a Sunday game. I don't think there was a formal dinner either. I'm sure I went up, and I actually met my mum and my sisters up at a local bar in Bruntsfield at Montpellier's, which was really strange. And then we went into town. I actually happened to be at uni with Will Greenwood. So we met up late at night, and, we're all having a beer together. So all that kind of antagonistic stuff after the game was not valid in my eyes. But yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing was just strange it being a Sunday. I know a lot of people that weren't there because it was a Sunday and have then said, or because it was a Sunday, had given up the tickets and funny things like that as well. But I don't know, for whatever reason, everyone seems to remember that game, because I don't think maybe hadn't won since 1990. Then I'm not sure if we didn't win for another 10 years or something after that. So it was a kind of one game in about quite a big time span where we'd actually beaten England. So it seems to be quite a well-remembered game.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of, you're right about that kind of wins and how long it had been, because it had been quite 1990 was the previous one,
Yeah.
and then it didn't happen again until 2006. So it did kind of stand alone for a while.
Yeah.
In terms of Scotland now, of course, they're going to Twickenham this weekend, looking for a fifth win in a row, which I imagine at times during the 2000s, if you'd said that there was a point where Scotland were going for 5 wins in a row over England, that would have seemed astonishing.
No, I mean, it's and Scotland have had the same with Ireland. It's the times of, tables have totally sort of turned, and England have become, a sort of lucky charm for Scotland. But I mean, I do think England are improving, and I do think just the way it's kind of fallen in the last 5 or 6 years, I think that'll be a very tough game for Scotland. Going down there on the back of English win, and obviously Scotland disappointing against Ireland. So I think it'll be a really tricky game. And some of Scotland's best performances over the last 5, 6, or let's say under Gregor, have definitely been at home. It's been a few good away wins as well, but a lot of the great performances have been at home. And Twickenham's always a tough place to go.
That Irish result, and I guess performance as well, it's hard when you lose two players like Finn Russell and Darcy Graham early in that first half, isn't it? And then you're having to rejig a backline against a team who look so fluid. What did you sort of make of how they played in the game?
I mean, the injury bit's just sod's law. The one time you pick two backs on the bench and you get ding at the same time. However, I mean, the first 20 minutes had been all Ireland as well. They'd been held up over the line, I think, 3 times in 20 minutes, plus the try they scored. So they were under the pump already, but clearly that doesn't help. And I think when Sione's not playing, there's just so much more, in my eyes anyway, there's just so much more attention on Finn. You've got one real primary threat to mark, whereas when Sione's on there, there's definitely sort of 2-pronged threats there, and so I don't think So there was some additional pressure on Finn before, in the previous game as well, and there will be going forward. And that's just something that's kind of been the case over the last 5, 6 years, albeit the last couple. Sione's really helped that. So I think, if you're doing your analysis in Scotland, I think what people forget about Finn is he's got all these maverick touches, but essentially he is an extremely good kicker and passer of the ball. His basics are extremely good. He's a good defender. So even when you take that out of a team, never mind his little bits of magic, you're still going to lose something. And I think that sometimes gets forgotten.
And in terms of, it's obviously a huge year if we think about the Lions as well coming up, and we could see countless kind of Scots on that Lions tour. Who do you sort of see as players who should be going to Australia, really based on how the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly. Well, I know Pierre didn't start the last game, but Pierre Schoeman's a fantastic player. Coached him at Edinburgh. He's a great man and a good rugby player. Xander Fagerson he's outstanding. He'd be a shoo-in for me. Guys like Rory Darge have stuck their hand up hugely. Jack Dempsey, Matt Fagerson have been very, very good. Finn, clearly, Sione, if he gets fit, both wingers, the whole back three. They've all done so well over the last 2 years. Say, I just hope we get another 2 or 3 good performances, and it does enough. They see enough sort of money in the bank, and they do themselves justice in these last 3 games to get themselves on that touring party.
It feels like we've come a long way from the Lions tours, where you had like maybe 2 or 3 Scots potentially on the tour, which I know we had in either 2009 or 2005. I can't remember. This is a special, because this is such a special group. Do you sort of feel like we need a bit more from them, maybe in terms of results and pushing for the title,
Yeah,
or is it?
I think that's the frustration up here, is that there probably hasn't been a better Scottish team in terms of individuals. Look, I don't know how many I mentioned there, 8 or 9 guys, and there's probably a couple more that could possibly be on a Lions tour. Back when Scotland were struggling to beat the likes of Wales and England, and Ireland, you're naturally not going to have many people on the trip. Whereas now, they've played well against certainly England and Wales. There's guys there, so. And like you say, therefore, with that comes, it's the same in every country. Supporters, fans, media, we all want, I think, as you probably said, potentially some of the results, potentially, you could argue, should be slightly higher than they've been, finishing 3rd and 4th for this group of players, which is what it's been over the last 4 or 5 years, isn't probably what might be expected. Albeit it's in a really tough competition with very good teams. Ireland, France over the last 4 or 5 years have been exceptional. So, it's going to be hard to break into the top 2. But, could we have knocked them off a couple of times? Could you be finishing second and third, which hasn't happened yet?
And it's the margins. I mean, last year's the one that springs to mind, really, isn't it? With the way that France game ended at Murrayfield with the slightly contentious fashion, and then going to Rome and being a bit off the pace. That kind of sums up how tight it is, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the same's this year. I mean, it's a cliche, but if you don't win your home game, all the away games are so tough. If you don't win your home games, so last year France, this year Ireland, you're then, it's just so tough to go away from home and win. So it's a big three last games for Scotland.
Before I get your prediction for Saturday, can I just ask about Accelerate Rugby and the work you're doing? I've seen you pop up in the past doing stuff with Fiji and the Netherlands. Who are you doing stuff with at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really weird situation. I mean, I think it's just over 3 years since I sort of left Edinburgh, and I've got a couple of young kids. So the kind of main aim is trying to be a bit more normal after pro rugby. But yeah, we sort of run. It's almost like a mobile academy. So lots of stuff in the holidays, sort of academy kind of based, best coaches, and we get lots of good players. And then amongst that, I've been so lucky. COVID coached Fiji, done some stuff in America. I was over in Washington with a friend 2 weeks ago. Bit of stuff with Holland, semi-pro team over here. So just, it's a weird thing when you're in pro rugby, you literally can't catch breath. Anytime you get off, you just want to sort of rest. And all of a sudden now you're experiencing all these different kind of, cultures with Fiji, but these teams, different coaches, you're catching up with people every time you're doing kind of new bit of work, and you just keep learning. So it's less stressed, more enjoyable. I've got a bit more time at home, but bizarrely enough, you're probably a better coach now than you were 3 years ago, or when you're at Edinburgh, or 10 years ago when you were in Scotland. But that's sometimes how coaching works. But no, it's been great, really, really good.
And what do you personally really enjoy about kind of the way that you're doing? Is it kind of improving just players individually, their skills? And
well, I think that's probably the biggest shift. Is it's not weekly. Your performance is not based weekly on Saturday win and loss. We see lots of good kids coming to us, and like my job and the coach's job is to make them better players and make them love their rugby and just enjoy playing the game and improve their skills. And I suppose it's a bit like maybe teaching in that sort of way. It's less pressured, it's more developmental, and find it very rewarding. So look, we still bizarrely enough coach a lot of the same stuff and a lot of the same principles. It's just on a sort of different level, really.
Oh, great stuff. Well, listen, I haven't checked the forecast for Saturday, and I feel like I should have done. But let's get your prediction. Who do you think is going to win?
I think it'll be a really tight game, but let's go. Scotland are going to bounce back, but I think it'll be a really, really tight game. A couple of points, but I think it'll be fairly high scoring. I think it could be a sort of 28-25, 30-28 type of game.
I'd take that. That sounds great fun. Duncan, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
No problems. Absolute pleasure.
Go.Compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby podcast. Go.Compare is a proud sponsor of the WRU, offering support across all levels of rugby. We are big believers in the importance of grassroots rugby, and that's why we partnered with Telegraph Media Group to launch the Making a Difference campaign. From volunteers to groundsmen, referees to coaches, we wanted to celebrate the people who are really making a difference and reward them with £5,000 for their club to improve the grassroots game. Go to telegraph.co.uk/making a difference to find out more about the grassroots heroes who won our prize pot this year. Go.compare. Feel the deal.
Just like rugby, running a business takes grit, hard work, and a great team behind you. That's where Funding Circle comes in. As sponsors of Premiership Rugby, they're backing businesses like yours with access to fast, hassle-free finance to help you thrive. From coffee shops to kit manufacturers, they backed over 100,000 businesses with more than £13 billion since 2010. To find out how Funding Circle can help get your business goals over the line, visit fundingcircle.com/rugby.
Okay, rest of the weekend now, and a really intriguing game in Cardiff between Wales and Ireland. So obviously a massive week for Welsh rugby last week with Warren Gatland stepping down. The writing had felt slightly on the wall after the Easter game that he might go at some point, whenever that was going to be, but he's gone now. Matt Sherratt comes in from Cardiff Rugby, has a great reputation from chatting to people kind of last week and players there about being a great communicator, very good motivator, great kind of attacking outlook. It's led to a bit of a reshuffle of the Wales coaching staff. And so, Charlie, tell me why that now means that Wales are going to beat Ireland on the weekend.
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
However,
you sure?
Yeah. However, I think that's a decisive call that is going to benefit them for the rest of the Six Nations. And I just think Sherratt's first moves, bringing in Jared Evans, bringing in Gareth Hanscom, bringing in Max Llewellyn, not necessarily saying that sidelining Rob Howley was a good choice, but it gives them clarity and it clearly suggests that he's going to take hold of the attack and the strategy sort of when they are in possession, which has seemed to me to be one of the most cluttered things about how they're playing. They've really not looked cohesive there, and I think that is just a good way of setting out your priorities. And I actually think there will be an upturn in the way they're looking and the intensity they're playing with, because there will be that bounce. And I think I just didn't buy throughout that the sort of narrative that who else is going to do better with this squad. Warren Gatland's hamstrung because of this squad of players and this group of players he's working with, because I thought there were mistakes in how that Six Nations squad was assembled, not being able to sort of lean on that cohesion with Thomas Williams, Gareth Hanscom, Max Llewellyn, and you throw Ben Thomas in. You can now bring Ben Thomas back to the position that he's more familiar with at Cardiff under Sherratt. So I just think that's good, and that's not going to be enough for them to beat Ireland probably, but it's going to be enough for, I think, you to see sort of more encouragement about how this squad of players can have a crack.
You could instantly rejig the backline and have Hanscom come in at 10 and Max Llewellyn at 13, and then you've got a sort of mini Gloucester spine in there, which we didn't expect. Although we should point out Jared Evans is in there.
Exactly. You could have Jared Evans at 10 and Hanscom at 15.
You could. They have done that before. I think that
especially with Liam Williams being injured.
Yeah, that is a possible look. I think in terms of Ireland, I'm not going to go down the route of off the ball last week, who cheekily suggested how many players would Ireland need on the field to beat Wales.
It's a good game.
And I think it got down to, one of them was like, maybe with 12, which was a bit far.
I would like to see it.
You'd like to see
three early red cards.
In this age of red cards, you might get a brief 20-minute window or 10-minute window where you could see it happen. But obviously, Ireland they're not going to rest and rotate. Although I think Caelan Doris is out or is a doubt. So
yeah, a very, very strong doubt. I think he's out and a doubt for France.
Which is an interesting wrinkle, isn't it? I guess, because it then takes out your captain, rejigs about row selection. What disaster having Jack Conan.
I was going to say, presumably Conan just comes straight in.
To bring in. I don't think we shouldn't see any other changes from Ireland, should we? They'll just roll out the same side.
You would assume so, as they're 2 from 2. No need to change it. And it's not like they can sort of, well, I suppose they can in a way, but it's going to be very difficult for them to tailor to horses selection, to tailor a selection to Sherratt's Wales, because we haven't seen Sherratt's Wales yet. So you'd expect them to just go the same, wouldn't you?
Except
for Doris.
I would think so. And the Wales-Ireland game in last year's Six Nations in Dublin, which was, I think, was that the 31-7 game? That was definitely one of the lowest Gatland points. I can't remember seeing many two games where there was such a gap in terms of the quality and how competitive the two sides were. So progress from that would be really positive.
And they're at home, and you'd expect a bit of renewed energy and a bit of renewed impetus from the fans with a new coach who's called up players who we thought, should have been there all along. You'd expect there to be a bit of buoyancy around the Principality. I mean, there's always buoyancy around the Principality Stadium, but you'd expect a bit of renewed optimism, maybe. I mean,
yeah.
Look, he's not a miracle worker, is he? But I mean, there is certainly a sense of, okay, we've moved on. The dead cat bounce, they call it in football, don't they? And we'll see if it works.
Last two games, you've had Ireland winning 29-7, 34-10, and 31-7. So any sort of kind of progress into that margin would be an enormous success for Wales, wouldn't it? The Ben Thomas element of it fascinates me, only because Gatland clearly felt they needed to develop more depth at 10. Fine. You don't have Sam Costello for the Six Nations. That's a pain. So you're forced into doing other stuff. But Gatland in October said, I think Ben Thomas is the best back in Wales, and he's playing exceptionally at 12. And then we've just had these run of games where that didn't happen. And I think that's going to be the one selection over time where people are going to be like, I get what you were trying to do, trying to move away from Anscombe, who is going to be 36 by the time we get to Australia. But at the same time, it's the one that sticks out, isn't it, as the selection that didn't make sense.
Hugely, and one of the best backs in England also not being selected in Max Llewellyn as well.
Which is another...
That's maybe sort of being a little bit over the top, but he's certainly in superb form for Gloucester, scoring tries for fun. And look, I was obviously at their game against Leicester, and he looked really, really good there.
Versatile as well, isn't he? He's been on the wing a fair bit for Gloucester, and they've played some intricate stuff, are ambitious off in transition situations. So that sounds like he suits how Sherratt's going to go about things.
And he's got experience with Sherratt as well from Cardiff. He's an interesting guy, isn't he, Max Llewellyn? Because he's big, but he's I think he's one of those players who's learned to be more direct over time because he didn't necessarily sort of come to him as naturally, and he sort of worked on that. I mean, idolised Jamie Roberts growing up, which is a good starting point. But there's a nice balance there, isn't there, between Thomas as a playmaker, Llewellyn as a direct runner. Hopefully that just gives Wales a bit more shape. Although, yeah, I think Ireland winning by 10 to 15 points feels very reasonable, and it might be
maybe
even more
conservative.
Yeah, might be. I mean, we'll see how they're getting on.
Yeah. Oh God, I just looked at the handicap's 24.
Well,
that's huge.
That's away as well.
I know.
What was the Wales handicap earlier in the Six Nations where we were like, that's outrageous, and then actually it was the France game.
It was England-France with France were +6, weren't they?
Yeah, but it was the Wales-France one that we thought...
the sheer size of the Wales-France one, we were like, oh, crikey, because it was, 28 points or something? I can't remember. And the other game...
And in the end, it was way too
conservative. And in the end, it was far
far
too conservative. So what do we know? And the other game, Italy-France on Sunday, which, Charles, give us an idea. I think inside France and outside France, the reaction was pretty much, how on earth did they botch that at Twickenham?
Yes.
With all the chances they missed. So because of that, and because of the weather and just like various factors, how much kind of heat has there been on Gautier in France coming out of that?
Well, not tons. I think it has been, reading the French press, it has looked like they've sort of put it down. I mean, there's been anger, of course, and disappointment, but it does seem like it's been put down to a blip rather than anything particularly terminal. I mean, as we said last week, you had world-class players, Dupont, Ramos, Penaud, Bielbiere dropping, Milvaca dropping scoring passes, which they would never do. One of them would catch them 9 times out of 10. They wouldn't do that for their clubs, and they don't really do it for France that often either. So I think at the minute it is a blip, but if they are ropey on Sunday against Italy and, God forbid if they actually lose, then I think the knives will come out for Gautier.
Yeah.
Because they have a golden generation of players. I think we've said this so many times that not many England players would get in that French starting 15. I think that maintains now, and if they were to lose to Italy, and then you'd say odds on they're going to lose to Ireland, they're going to be coming 3rd or 4th. And that is not good enough with that group of players.
Yeah, so they actually need need a bit of a springboard here to go into Dublin in a couple of
and
weeks'
make
time.
it interesting, not just for France and for Ireland, for the neutral. We want to see a competitive championship, and France going to Ireland and at least giving them a game at winning would be great for the neutral. It blows it all open again, and then we go into Super Saturday where at least three nations could win it.
Yeah. Flamand back for Toulouse last night, I think. Which is potentially significant.
So straight back in and involved, or
probably yes, because they've been playing Ruma out of position in the row. So presumably yes. Oridu was also sent back to his club, so you'd expect Ruma to drop either to the flank or drop down onto the bench in place of Oridu. And it's a big game for Italy as well, because obviously they lost to Scotland first up, and then of course they did beat Wales, but they didn't look entirely convincing necessarily against a really quite poor Welsh performance. And so they looked so promising last season, and they look like they're really building under Gonzalo Quesada. It's a big game for them at home.
I think if having watched them the first two rounds, I would certainly ignore those. I wouldn't ignore those two Wales Maul tries, but I would take all those two late Wales tries, but I'd take them with a pinch of salt, because I thought Italy showed great game management in the weather. What I would like to see is just a bit more attacking endeavour, because in the first 2 weeks against Scotland, they just couldn't click. Like, Scotland's defence kind of kept them very narrow, and they just they were a bit of a mess. And then obviously the weather in Rome the 2 weeks ago just didn't really allow them to sort of play with that much width. And they just played the weather and played the conditions very well. I'd like to see them shifting the ball a bit more and getting some more dynamic runs out of Menoncello and Brex in midfield, because they've been a bit quiet in that respect so far. So I think the weather looks great in Rome on Sunday. It's kind of like sunshine, no rain, like inviting kind of a bit more running rugby. I know under Quesada they've sort of tightened up their game plan a bit, but I'd just like to see them loosen it up a bit and maybe give our friend Capuazzo some chances to kind of open up a France defence.
I think Montiuani's out, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, which is a shame, because he's a big threat for them on the wing, and a lot. He can make things happen. He's a bit different to Capuazzo in that he tends to sort of find a metre or two down a blind alley, whereas Capuazzo needs a little bit more space, I think, just because he's not huge. Whereas Montiuani's a really strong runner. But yeah, I think it's a big game for both. Well, they all are. It's a Six Nations game, but I think it really is a big game for both, because I think a really comfortable French victory, and would feel like backward steps for Italy. But if it's really close, then question marks will be asked to get out. I think.
Yeah, I think so. Charlie, anything to add?
I was just looking at the last kind of three games. I've totally got amnesia about the 60 points to 7 pumping that France gave Italy in the World Cup, because the other two, either side of them in the Six Nations, have been really close. Yeah. France edging it in Rome 29-24 in 2023, and then obviously that 13-all draw in Lille that you were at.
Yeah.
That was Garbeezy's kicking tee malfunction.
Garbeezy's kicking tee malfunction
twice.
Then replaced the ball. Then France encroached. He hit the post, and I think Mofana then tried to counter and ended up running it off into touch.
Wild,
crazy ending.
Cool, yeah. Well, hopefully we get as much drama on Sunday. Just want to give a quick shout out to the Telegraph's Six Nations custom gift book. Celebrating 25 years of the tournament, the book relives legendary moments from Italy's debut win in 2000 to England's 2003 World Cup triumph and Ireland's 2009 Grand Slam. Featuring iconic match reports and images from the archives, it includes contributions from ourselves and renowned journalists like Gavin Mayers, Mick Cleary and Chris Foy. This edition also includes up-to-date coverage of this year's tournament, a must-have for any rugby fan. Pre-order now at the Telegraph bookshop and save 10% with our exclusive discount code RUGBY. Okay, before we get into this week's questions, we want to talk Lions. We have a great selector tool on the website where you can build your own squad. Charlie, you've been doing a bit of squad selecting yourself for the Lions. Talk to me about what you've been thinking with open side flanker.
Well, I think in typically indecisive style, it's not necessarily number 7, because I think it's sort of more the profile of player that I think they'll need in Australia, because the Wallabies under Joe Schmidt are all about generating fast ball, potentially sort of punching either side of the ruck to generate quick ball and generating space that way, as they showed perfectly. That was sort of the foundation of how they beat England at Twickenham. And that to me suggests they will go quite heavy on the on that sort of profile of player that's a breakdown disruptor and mobile, which we presume that will be quite important as well out in Australia. And the other sort of strand to that is that this is a position where they really do have a lot of strength in depth. And it seems kind of crazy sometimes when you're thinking about picking from 4 countries, but there will be some positions where there isn't that depth and that quality. So I just had a look at the runners and riders for there. And then what's quite interesting is that, and I think I was sort of probably called biased for doing this, but there are some countries have definite front runners. So if you're talking about Ireland and Scotland, Darge and Van der Fleer would be the 2 guys that would be absolutely in with a shout. Wales have Jack Morgan, obviously, but Tommy Raffles played a lot. I think he's played 8 in the last year. He's played 8. He started 8 Test matches, which is quite informative in itself. And then England have got a lot of options because they've gone with this sort of all-out sort of scavenging back row so far in this Six Nations with the two Currys and Ben Earl, and then they've also got Sam Underhill, who's injured and has been superb in Test matches. He is, that Test match animal phrase coined by Sir McGeechan. He certainly fits that. And then they would also have a guy who will absolutely be in the mix despite not playing Texas rugby in Jack Willis. So I just wondered, sort of at the bottom, and sort of probably take a while to get to the point in this piece, but I wondered whether they can fit 4 of those, that profile of player in the squad. And I sort of concluded I think they need Van der Fleer because he just offers that synergy with the vast amount of Irish players that are going to be there, Leinster players in particular. And then you're probably looking at Tom Curry's been outstanding this championship so far. So has Rory Darge. And then I personally feel, and this is all personal preference, and absolutely happy. I have been happy to listen to other views. I just think they should give Jack Willis as much time. There are obviously logistical hurdles to overcome if Toulouse keep winning, and it looks like they will, and it looks like they'll be deep in the top 14. But I think you want to give him every chance of being on the tour
over Ben Earl. And Ben Earl obviously covers 2 positions.
Ben Earl covers 2 positions. Jack Willis has been playing a bit of 8 for Toulouse. And when we're talking about covering 2 positions for the Lions, really, you're talking about, can they start in a midweek game at a push? And they probably can. It's like Stuart Hogg going as an emergency 10.
Have any of them not played 8? I'm just trying to think off the top of my head.
So Van der Fleer and Darge would be out and out 7. Tom Curry has obviously been at 6 and he has that history.
Jack Morgan's pretty versatile. You don't think
Jack Morgan's played 8. So these are fantastic players
for his region, yeah.
And I must stress that my mind could be totally changed next week. Next week, the Calcutta Cup game is a fascinating kind of game in its own right, as we've spoken about before. But in a Lions context, I think it takes on, there's so many more subplots, particularly in the back row, because a subplot of this winning run that Scotland are on is that Darge, Dempsey going further back, Barkley, Watson have been a total thorn in England's side. So
100%. And actually, Jack Dempsey is a bit of an outsider, isn't he? Because he could.
I think he's a fantastic player.
He is a fantastic player. He plays all 3 back row positions, so he could quite easily.
Back row for the Lions is just a nightmare to pick because there's so many options, which is why you should have a go on the Telegraph Lions selected.
Can I run down the back rows that I had?
Oh yeah, please do.
So I had Chesham and I had Tyburn and I had Itoje, who probably in that order they are viable blind sides going from I don't think Itoje necessarily is anymore, but he could do it at a push. And then I picked 7 back rows, I think, including that wild card slot with Aaron Wainwright is in, as I have explained previously.
Not Pollock, like I imagine 90%
he'll be in there for a lot of people. I also had Conan and Doris, who's I'm pretty sure will go, and then I had Darge, Tom Curry, Jack Willis, and please don't forget who's the other one. Van der Fleer is the other one.
Van der Fleer is probably the
test
starter. Left until last. That's the Line Select tool. Please have a go with it. On to your questions. One from Adam, which Charlie, you described as delicious after it arrived. A Lions question. Which players from other respective nations are most suited to Andy Farrell's Irish style of play? There are clearly outstanding players we think should be going out, but who are the ones that best fit into Farrell's methods? And therefore, could we see some surprise picks? Charlie?
So to kind of, as an aside to start this, I remember speaking to Martin Gleeson, the ex-England attack coach, and he was speaking about how good someone like Owen Farrell would look in Leinster's attack. This was the year, I think, when Leinster sort of stormed to, I think, the first final that they had against La Rochelle, and they'd absolutely pumped Toulouse, and Johnny Sexton had looked fantastic as part of this really intricate shape they're playing, and Martin Gleeson was saying, look, Owen Farrell would be able to just boss that and would look fantastic in it. And that's what you think of, isn't it, when you think of Ireland, I think, is that being able to snap into sort of really intricate shape and breaking sides down with just really accurate, really kind of fluent phase play. The first person I thought of was actually Finn Smith, and just that would probably be a bit of a surprise pick at the minute. But to plug a column we did with Will Greenwood about the squad he'd picked, he said that, and the way he put this just really sort of resonated with how I hadn't been able to put it into words myself. But he said Finn Smith could go, and by just playing like a fly half in maybe for the midweek team, he will allow others to shine, and he will help the coaches implement their game plan really well. And that's just stuck to me. So Finn Smith is somebody that, it's going to be really difficult to implement unless they go, which they could do, and it's Andy Farrell's prerogative. They could go all out with tons and tons of Ireland players. And if you want a fly half to maybe slot into that, to run that, it's going to be very difficult unless they are just really understated facilitators, which is what I feel Finn Smith is.
I wondered Henry Slade as well.
Slade was one I'd considered.
Yeah, just because I in terms of slotting into Andy Farrell's Irish style, just because he can be often, in terms of his ball playing ability and his footballing skill, the sort of glue that holds it together. I'd love to see him playing with Bundy Aki in a midfield. I think that would be a really nice midfield combination. I'm not necessarily sure he'll go on the lines. Well, it depends how they want to defend. If they want to blitz Andy Farrell's side, then they might have Slade in.
It's a bit of a tangent, but do we get more than the 13 Welsh Lions in the third test in Australia? As in, could we get the equivalent of 13 Ireland?
Certainly likely.
I mean, maybe
if they want to win.
Do you just want to do the whole? Do you just do the whole side? I mean, that might be an interesting topic when we get there. Andrew Ford wanted to know which England player, similar theme, which England player would best suit the Scotland team right now, and vice versa.
They love scavenging back rowers, so Jamie Ritchie, Rory Darge, right up there.
Darge would be fun in England, yeah.
I mean, it's a really, really obvious point to make, and he's injured, but England would really adore 72.
Yes, I was going to say that. I don't think this sounds maybe a little bit insane, but I don't think Finn Russell. I don't think necessarily England are really well stocked at 10. I know Finn Russell probably is the standout of the four on his day, but I don't think necessarily they would kill for Finn. They've got their own Finn.
That's good that they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because that would be bad.
And then vice versa. Goodness me. Well, just because of the injuries, maybe they would want a centre or two because of their injuries.
Yeah,
Scotland, that is. I mean, Ollie Lawrence is playing really well. I've been really impressed with him this season. I don't think not so good in England shirt in the autumn, but he's been playing really well for Bath, and I've been really impressed with him in the first two England games.
How about, speaking of injury situations, how about George Martin for Scotland, just to kind of fulfill that sort of maul destroyer role that Scott Cummins, they've lost with Scott Cummins not being there. Can I just zip back up to...
they've also got a hooker issue as well, Scotland.
Yeah, zipping back up to Adam's question on the Lions, George Ford's another one that has,
yes,
among
100%.
the best players not to go on the Lions tour to date. I think he'd be pretty handy.
I keep forgetting he's in the England squad, but he's there every squad update. He is there.
It shows the depth that, what a talented player he is, and he's not even getting in the match day 23. I know he was injured earlier in the year, but to show the depth that they have at 10.
David wants to know: is Henry Pollock a bolter for the Lions, and why have none of the young England props had many opportunities apart from Baxter?
I think he is. I said this, and I don't think you agree. Pollock as a bolter.
I just can't. I mean, I just think he's such an obvious fixture on that summer tour for England.
Oh, I would agree with that as well. But I think that he's playing very well, and he must be close to getting into that England 23.
Is he just significant? He's been retained, rather than going back to 20.
And Chandler Cunningham himself did not get on against France.
Yeah. To recap Pollock's last week, so he went to Girona for the training camp, played in the under-26 Nations wins over Ireland and France. was called up for the fallow week training last week and is now, still in the squad. So could be a debut against Italy or Wales, potentially. And then is it just one of those where, maybe he's a bolter, but he is also in the most competitive position out of all of them. And therefore, if he was, I don't know, a centre or something, or like a
scrum half,
or a hooker, then maybe it's a bit of a different conversation.
Are you realistically bringing him over someone like Sam Underhill?
No, probably
not if he's fit.
This point.
If he's fit. And then the props. I guess they've got Baxter and Hayes on the bench, and Hayes is not old.
He's
very much young, and they gave Apoku Fujor a debut.
I assume it's a point about him and the fact that he hasn't featured yet.
I think he became the first player to make a senior England debut who wasn't born when they won the World Cup in 2003.
Wow.
That is. I meant to tweet that when he actually got on the field and I forgot completely.
It's quite sad, actually, isn't it, when you think about it? I guess it's more a question with him and Afo for Sobon just got unlucky, didn't he? Picked up that injury. Kind of, when was that? Was that early Jan or mid Jan? I've lost.
It was just before Christmas. It was before Christmas.
Just before Christmas. Yeah. So that was sort of his.
Because he tuned up
his undoing.
Phil Baxter in that game.
Listen, the kind of a subplot to Lions is that when England and the other teams do go on tour, you do get really fun kind of teams of young uncut players sort of bonded together. So look out for them in the summer, I would say.
One loose head that England are keen on fast tracking is Tarek Hafar, who's in the England A squad for this game against Ireland, which is going to be really, really interesting. And I interviewed him actually at the beginning of the season, and he's an absolute awesome in the gym. And it was really interesting to listen to how he's sort of learning about set piece patience and stuff like that. And he was actually playing in a game that Pollock missed because he was injured. I know it was Saints Quins that I covered, and he's special.
They really rate the tight head Luke Green as well. The young Northampton tight head. There's two Northampton.
He went
props.
over to MLR for a bit in the States, didn't he? For like a brief bit after the Irish collapse.
They really rate him.
Now he's back in the Saints system. He does look very good. And final question from Tom. I don't know if you saw the USA Canada ice hockey on Sunday, where they literally had a fight after about 9 seconds, and there were about 3 fights.
Can they just call it? Is that ice hockey?
Well, they sort of just drop the gloves, don't they? And then it's like, then it's just on. Yeah. It's kind of how it works.
Concussion
from my limited watching of ice hockey / playing NHL games as a kid on. Sorry, dramatic pause. But Tom wants to know, should the Calcutta Cup start with 3 players from both teams having a punch-up to mirror the ice hockey? And if so, which 3 from both teams?
Well, I mean, you'd love to see it. You'd love to see a bit
I thought that was you going, I don't care who it is, I just want to see it.
That is very much me saying that. Bring back a bit of niggle.
Who would you want? I mean, I don't...
Martin.
Genge, I think I'd want.
Genge. Tom Curry.
Yeah, Tom Curry.
Curry's an interesting one.
Tom Curry's a good shot. What about
Matt Fagerson?
Schumann.
Matt Fagerson's quite a scary bloke, isn't he?
Doohan and Schumann.
Yeah, Doohan just for the comical, holding someone off with a palm and as they try and swing at him. Yeah, Doohan would be good.
There would be lots of potential weight classes that you could put together.
Yeah.
So Darcy Graham would be out, wouldn't he? Wouldn't be playing, but
Darcy off the top rope from somewhere with an elbow drop.
Yeah,
that would be his best way.
Pound for pound, I think he could.
So it's now a wrestling ring. It's not a scrap. We've gone on a tangent, but
lots of possibilities.
Tables, lands, and chairs.
Listen, Tom, we're all for it. We'll ask, but I don't think they'll agree to it. But it's a nice idea. To go back to that earlier tease about who said it was the 2000 defeat was the worst moment of their career. It was
Sir Clive.
Yeah.
Sir Clive Woodward.
Worst moment.
He said that for 20 years after that defeat at Murrayfield, his computer screensaver was a picture of the Scotland captain Andy Nicol and his team celebrating the win.
So it's
Why for 20 years?
I don't know.
It's a great image,
not in rugby anymore.
Yeah, until 2020.
I like that Calcutta Cup image.
During COVID, he got rid of it.
Andy Nicol with his bleeding chin and holding the trophy up and looks like he's been in a washing machine. It's a good Calcutta Cup image, that. Right, that's all for today. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charles. I believe, are we all at Twickenham on
we are
on
very
Saturday?
excited.
We don't often all get to be at the same location on a Six Nations weekend, so that's quite exciting. Charles, you're so quiet that I'm worried that you're going to Rome and you just haven't told us. Are you going to be at Twickenham?
I'm at Twickenham.
Okay, great.
Calcutta Cup, looking forward to it.
Which means it's time for some predictions. Who wins Wales out of Ireland?
Ireland,
Ireland, yeah.
Ireland. Sorry, a better question. Ireland by how many? I'm going to get Ireland by 15.
Oh, I was going to say exactly the same thing, and I'm going to say the same thing.
No, that's a cop out.
Ireland by 16 then.
Oh, I'll go 14. I'll go.
No one's going Ireland by 20. Really? This Wales side?
Yeah,
I think they'll be a little bit better.
This Wales side, Matt Sherratt's Wales side. They're going to get closer.
Okay, Twickenham then. Who wins between England and Scotland?
I'm going to go England by 6.
Charlie?
Yeah, England as well. I think by probably fewer than 9.
So logically I think England, but for variety, because they're 3-1, I will say Scotland. I'm not quite sure how Scotland do it, but I will say Scotland. And Italy-France on Sunday. France for me.
France by 10. Maybe more.
Yeah, I'd love Italy to get close by.
I'd love it. They've got to go to the Stadio Olimpico and get a result. And I would love it if they beat them.
I could see it being nervy though. I don't think.
I could see it being nervy because Italy won't roll over, but I think France by 10.
Keep up to date with everything from the Six Nations over on the Telegraph website as we build up to round 3, and keep your eyes peeled as well for a big interview appearing later this week on both the website and on the Telegraph Rugby podcast channel. Until then, listeners, goodbye. Enjoy the games.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby podcast. Every rugby player knows they need the support of their team to get the best results, and it's the same with insurance. When you are looking for great deals on your insurance, you can find the perfect support in Go.compare, helping compare the right deals for you. Feel the deal with Go.compare.